All right, here we go again. So a lot of my friends told me I should do this movie because I kind of teased it in my last video on Speed Racer 2008. And at the time it was on Netflix. Okay, we stan physical media. So I thought, what the heck? And I gave it a shot and it turned out to be pretty good. I grew up with this little thing called Boomerang, so the Flintstones were definitely a part of my childhood. Admittedly, I don't remember any specific episodes like I do with something like SpongeBob or Phineas and Ferb, but it was around, okay? My last video was about a live action adaptation of an animated property, and so is this one. So that's a fun niche, right? We're having fun. Anyway, enough diddle daddling, let's get into this. The movie opens on a surprisingly dour scene at the stone quarry. The music is super sinister, and at one point, a foreman shouts at some guys saying, "Hey, back to work! You guys had a break 2 days ago!" It feels so dystopian for some reason. It's definitely not how I was expecting this movie to begin, but I guess it kind of makes sense, and shortly after, we're introduced to our main villain for this featured film, Cliff Vanderstone. Cliff watches the working man grovel as he sips martinis from his high-rise office. We learn that Cliff is scheming to somehow embezzle a buttload of money from this company and run off to the tropics with help from his companion Sharon Stone. After that, we finally get to meet our leading man, Mr. Fred Flintstone, played by the amazing John Goodman. If you watched my Speed Racer video, you know John Goodman is a big reason why I wanted to check this movie out, and he does not disappoint. He's great. I mean, you just love watching him. We're treated to a great recreation of the show's original opening. It's so fun seeing live action actors perform these wild, cartoony motions, and with the costuming and set design, mwah! Chef's kiss, I love it. Next, we get an establishing shot of our stage, Bedrock, and join Fred and Barney on their way back home from work. Barney is ecstatic today because he and his wife, Betty, are finally going to get to adopt a boy. All of this is only possible because of some money Fred gave to the rebels, a decision that he made without consulting his wife and is actually trying to hide from her. So, yikes. Fred vehemently denies the claim that he's afraid to tell his wife. He says he's the king of his castle and does not need permission from his partner to make a major financial decision. Yeah, not a fantastic look. Said wife does pretty quickly put him in his place and catch on to his scheme. Luckily for Fred, though, she thinks it was a very sweet gesture, which it was, and supports him, but still, Fred, what the hell?
Now see here, Wilma. In this cave, I am the king.
And what, Fred?
And you have every right to know, my queen. I also bought a new bowling ball.
Get it? The joke is man. Okay, so now we're down at the adoption agency with Fred, Wilma, Barney, and Betty as they wait for their son. We also get to see a bus in this universe, and I don't know why the idea of a bus where everyone works together to make it move is both funny and inspiring to me, but yeah, it is. So the movie tries to pull this joke where the lady comes out with a baby and Barney and Betty go up all excited, only for it to be revealed that it's a baby monkey, and then they act very uncomfortable. It is revealed that that baby is actually for a monkey couple, but I still think this joke kind of has some tasteless implications. Regardless, they meet their little boy, Bam Bam, a kid who was raised by wild woolly mammoths before this and has super strength. So good for them. Wilma is a little too trigger happy, trying to capture the moment though, and spooks Bam Bam into knocking over Barney and jumping out the window and running off. Damn, they just got that kid in a loincloth, don't they? There's a little montage showing us things were a little rocky at first, but by the end of it, they're just one big happy family unit. We stan. Later on, we head down to the bowling alley with Fred and Barney where they're in a heated competition against a team of Neanderthals. It's down to the wire and Fred needs to get a strike to bring home the gold. He steps up to the plate and we get an amazing live action recreation of the tippy toe bowling technique from the classic cartoon. I freaking love seeing this kind of thing so much. So Fred obviously knocks down all 10 pins, and during the celebration, Barney recites a poem he wrote for his friend, showing his gratitude and vowing to repay him someday, somehow. After the festivities, Fred returns home late, being very careful to not disturb anything or anyone until he trips on a toy car and drops his bowling ball on his head. Ow! It's then revealed that Wilma's mother, Pearl, is there for some reason, and she immediately starts to insult Fred for just having a night out with the boys, and then she fat shames him. I hate Pearl. Pearl talks about how Fred is a worthless nobody, while Wilma could have married the guy who invented the wheel. Wilma, of course, comes to Fred's defense and sends Mom packing. Based. Fred, feeling very emasculated, heads off to bed with Wilma. Also, during this exchange, we hear this.
Why, you're out carousing with a bunch of Neanderthals.
Oh, really? Well, for your information, the Lodge no longer accepts Neanderthals.
Which is not true, and I'm not just saying that based on their appearances, okay? We also have this line.
I would like to propose a toast to not only a great bowler, but a great human being. And no offense to you guys.
So these guys are either some other species of Homo sapien, or after their defeat, they were banned from the bowling lodge. The next day, we're back at the company where Cliff announces to the workers that the company will be holding an aptitude test to hire one of them to be a new executive with, and I quote, an obscene salary and a shiny nameplate. Naturally, Fred is ecstatic at the opportunity to prove himself and become a somebody. He starts staying up late every night until the day of the big test. Cliff starts the timer, and our boy is struggling. But Barney seems to be breezing through it easy peasy. This is all conveyed to us purely through body language. Kudos to all the actors here. Whoa, that guy is cut. Time runs out and everybody puts their chisels down. Barney, being a pal, offers to take Fred's test up for him, and just from a little glimpse is mortified by what he sees. Knowing how much this opportunity means to his friend, Barney pulls a little switcheroo and swaps his and Fred's tests. Later on, it's time for the winner to be revealed, and it's Fred! But actually Barney, but yay Fred! But this might not actually be a good thing.
Well, Cliff, test results are in.
And our unsuspecting dupe is?
Believe it or not, the one who scored the highest was Fred Flintstone.
That big ape?
No, the big ape got a 65.
Flintstone? Oh, this can't be right. He must have cheated. He's dense. He's witless.
He's perfect.
The next morning, Fred has a little bit more pep in his step as today is his first day as an executive. He gets to head into the big fancy office building, and right here is where I want to take a moment to discuss the stone economy of this world for a bit. Just about everything in this world is made of stone, with maybe a little, animal hide, rope, and a little wood here and there. Yeah, of course, dinosaurs and other animals serve as the appliances, but everything else is dependent on this one resource. Remind you of anything? Cars, TV sets, high chairs, wheelchairs, lunchboxes, salt and pepper shakers, beer bottles. These people have to be so frickin' strong to handle all this solid stone like it is nothing. So during Fred's first day as an executive, he meets Sharon Stone, his personal assistant, and wow, this movie is dating itself. The male gaze is strong with this one. We also get to meet my favorite character of the movie, Nick the Bird. He's like an audio recorder that I guess is supposed to keep notes and send messages, but he's also a prim and proper business expert that clashes with Fred perfectly. I have a soft spot for practical effects and puppets in particular. I just love how expressive they can be, especially when it comes to comedy. One of my favorite parts of the 2022 Chip and Dale movie was this puppet cheese drug dealer. I just get a kick of how his eyes pop. This movie is jam-packed with awesome practical effects and set design. It is so nice to see a movie where everything is actually real. Now, they do use a little 1940s CGI here and there, and it's kind of rough, but they use it very sparingly. Overall, I think the movie looks great and still holds up. There's never a point where I'm taken out of the film. After watching such a CGI heavy film like Speed Racer, something like this is so refreshing. I wish we would do more stuff like this nowadays. Now then, let's go over Cliff and Sharon's scheme in a little bit more detail. You see, Cliff got Fred hired to be the fall guy for a plot to embezzle a boatload of money. The idea is to have Fred blindly sign a bunch of forms signing off on payments to shell companies, but before they can get started, they need to make sure Fred will do as they say. So they give him a little test and tell him to fire Barney because he scored the lowest on his aptitude test. Ooh. Fred tries to reason with Cliff, but he's pretty stern in his convictions. Fred is understandably quiet on the drive back home with Barney, and once they do get home, Barney just has to show Fred this newfangled contraption called a soap dish. Fred is reluctant, but Barney drags him into the house to surprise! Barney and Betty have put together a little party for Fred and got him a brand new suitcase with his name engraved on it and everything. Oh boy! Pearl is also there, and now she's just Fred's biggest fan. Oh, I hate her so much. Fred tries to refuse the suitcase, but everyone insists he takes the kind gift and starts asking why he's acting so strange. The guilt gets to be too much for Fred, and he tells Barney he's fired then and there. Barney takes the news surprisingly well, and he and Fred have a nice, calm chat over a cold one outside together. I was so relieved to see this is how they were going to handle the situation. I was so scared they were going to drag out this plot point and have this ruin their friendship, but they didn't. Barney does ask why he's being canned though, and Fred tells him it's because he scored the lowest on his aptitude test, and Barney still keeps the little test swapped to himself. Later on, we join Wilma and Betty as they're out shopping with the kids. Speaking of the kids, Bam Bam sees a woman's scarf with a wolf's head on it, and Bam Bam, being the little wild animal Tarzan boy he is, freaks and proceeds to smash the shit out of the jewelry department. Of course, given the rebels' situation, Betty's card doesn't have enough money to pay for the damages, and Wilma has to bail her out, much to Betty's shame. Betty promises she's gonna somehow pay Wilma back, she just doesn't know when or how yet. Wilma is nothing but supportive as Betty confides in her about how Barney is struggling to get a new job. Quick side note, why isn't Betty also looking for a job? I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home mom, but money is tight and you could always have Wilma babysit. Also, this tender moment is interrupted by a pterodactyl attack that sends everyone into a panic. And the pterodactyl does nothing except fly around and take a huge jump on a car. This never goes anywhere, by the way, and this is not a setup for anything at all. They must have just really loved that shit joke. Meanwhile, Fred is sitting in on a boardroom meeting where Cliff unveils his plan to build a automated processing plant that will produce modular housing units and also put nearly the entire workforce out of their jobs. Fred naturally isn't big on this idea and speaks up. He picks up Cliff's little model of said modular home and asks who's gonna live in houses this small. Now I think this is supposed to be a joke about how Fred is dumb and thinks the model is the same size the actual houses will be, but at the same time the actual size of these houses will be pretty small. So he's kinda making a legit point, especially from a family man's perspective. We then cut to Fred in his office about to happily sign away at whatever Sharon puts in front of him, but after a while of doing this, he's getting kind of curious and asks Sharon what all this stuff is for, and Sharon says they're just forms for the contractors that will be putting in Cliff's new modular home factory. This explanation satisfies Fred for a bit until he remembers the time he and Wilma had their kitchen remodeled and what crooks contractors can be. So he decides he should probably give these forms a quick glance over, and Sharon throws herself on the desk to stop him. She cranks the sex appeal to try and convince him to not read the documents, and then Wilma walks in on this whole situation. Now completely flustered, Fred forgets all about reading the papers, and he introduces Wilma and Sharon to each other. Sharon then heads off, and Wilma tells Fred about the rebels' troubles. They're having to rent out their own home to make ends meet, and the two agree they should open up their home to them. So now the Flintstones and rebels are under one roof, and everything is just peachy. For now. Back at the office, Fred finds himself looking down at the quarry missing the boys. A bit deflated, he walks over to Cliff's model of his modernization plan, and playing around with the little catapult, he fires a rock and smashes the display right as Sharon walks in. Fred uses his maximum charisma to play the whole thing off and confides in Sharon about his concerns with this modernization plan. He's still worried about all the guys in the quarry losing their job, and Sharon tries to play dumb, but she's not fooling Fred.
But wouldn't this thing put a lot of my guys out of work?
How would I know? I'm just a little old secretary.
Are you kidding me? You're smart. I mean, I could tell that right off. There's a lot more to you than you.
Thank you.
This flatters Sharon, and as she's about to head out, she tells Fred she hopes she didn't get him in too much trouble with Wilma the other day. Fred scoffs, saying, "Nah, she knows I love her," and then recounts how he and Wilma first met and how lucky he feels to have a woman like her in his life. All of this endears Fred to Sharon, and she even tries to convince Cliff they should just call the whole plan off. Of course, Cliff doesn't go for it and tells her to keep to what she's good at while caressing her. So it's time to move on to phase 2 of the plan, and Cliff gives Fred a huge bonus with a little advice. If you want to be a top executive, you should start spending like one. Later that day, Fred goes out and buys a fancy new sports car, and we start a little montage where Fred is spending money, buying Wilma new clothes, getting a new garbage disposal, buying a boat, adding on to their home, and even getting a hot tub. Meanwhile, Barney is bouncing around to different dead-end jobs, and a resentment is supposed to start building between the Rubbles and the Flintstones, but honestly, I think it feels kind of weak. The montage is pretty short, and we never actually see Fred interact with Barney, so this sudden resentment feels out of nowhere to me. The closest thing we get is Wilma asking Betty for a towel during a private workout appointment, so we have a bit of a telling and not showing problem. So one day at the office, Cliff comes to see Fred with some forms for him to sign, just as Fred is about to head out to a fancy dinner with Wilma. Fred asks what these forms are for, and Cliff tells him they're giving all the guys down at the quarry some paid vacation time, something Fred has been pushing for a while. Based. Cliff reads Fred to it, but just as Fred is about to sign, Dick the Bird hops down and tries to suggest to Fred that maybe he should actually read the documents he's signing before signing them, and Fred does not take being told what to do by a bird very well and tells him he doesn't need advice from the office supplies, which really bites because we also learn that Dick the Bird did go to business school. Imagine going to school and the only job you can get afterwards is as a memo keeper. Does he get paid? He should be getting paid. All the animals should be getting paid. I know companies are trying to make everything a subscription service and make it so that you don't own anything, but I feel like in the Flintstones world, that's probably how it should be, right? So Fred quickly signs the papers and heads out to the restaurant with Wilma and Betty, where they're waiting for Barney, who has started another new job. And when the busboy comes around, they find out what that job is. Alrighty, so here I want to talk a little bit about the idea that money has turned Fred into some kind of asshole, because I just don't see it. I mean, he's taking his best friend and his wife out to a fancy expensive dinner, he tips well, he's happy Barney got a new job, he fought to get the guys in the quarry some paid vacation time, he's still the same chill Fred. Sure, he's a little pig-headed here and there, but he's no Scrooge. So Barney goes to get a new tablecloth and sees on the TV that the quarry workers are protesting outside the quarry, chanting, "We want Flintstone." It turns out those papers Cliff had Fred sign weren't to give everyone paid vacation time, it was to fire everyone. A rightfully upset Barney confronts Fred about the situation, and things do not go well. Fred just claims that Barney is making things up because he's jealous of his success, and Barney reveals that he switched tests with Fred, which of course Fred does not believe. One thing that I really like about this argument is that Wilma is actually on Fred's side at first, but later when things cool down and the Rubbles are moving out, she tries to apologize and reason with them while Fred is doubling down. I like this. I think it makes them feel more like a real couple. They got each other's backs, but don't always fully agree. Once the Rubbles are gone, Wilma confronts Fred, asking him if keeping his pride intact was worth ruining his relationship with his lifelong friend, and Fred asks, who needs the Rubbles? With Wilma replying, she does. But you know what she doesn't need, Fred?
I don't need this necklace. I don't need this lamp. And I don't need this television set.
Not the TV.
This. Oh, I don't think I'll be needing any of this phone China. Because I don't have any friends to invite to dinner.
Iconic. So after that, Wilma packs her bags and takes Pebble and Dino with her to her mother's house, leaving Fred truly alone now. Okay, so the Rubbles are homeless now, Wilma and Pebbles are with Pearl, and Fred is all on his own. So things are not looking great. The next day, Fred comes into work to find a mob demanding his head. Once at work, though, he goes through the company files and finally realizes Cliff and Sharon's plans, but it's too little too late and Fred is forced on the run. He's out on the street in a fake beard and a trench coat as he passes by a celebrity cameo hosting a crime show that's doing a story on him. Yeah, looks like Cliff's plan worked pretty well. Fred ends up in a cave where a bunch of laid-off workers are taking refuge. All seems chill until, and stick with me here, Fred's old garbage disposal rats him out. Yeah, do you remember how I mentioned a new garbage disposal in the money spending montage? You just got a good setup and payoff right there. Although I don't really like the implications that the utilities of this world just go homeless after they're replaced. I mean, planned obsolescence is so much more messed up in this world. The Flintstones live in such a capitalist hellhole. Anyhow, Fred books it out of there, and meanwhile, Betty goes to see Wilma at her mother's house as she just can't leave her friend alone at a time like this. Iconic. Again! By the way, while I do hate Pearl, I think her actor, Elizabeth Taylor, is absolutely killing it.
She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment.
I love actors that make me hate their characters, because, that's how you know they're good, right? The three watch the TV show reporting on Fred, and Wilma gets an idea of how to clear Fred's name. Cut to her and Betty sneaking into the office to retrieve Dictabird, who's heard everything that's happened in Fred's office for the past few months. He's not eager to help, though, but Betty manages to, convince him. This poor guy cannot catch a break. Meanwhile, Cliff and Sharon are packing things up, getting ready to skip town. Well, at least one of them is, as Cliff has only purchased one plane ticket. He says it's to not arouse suspicion. He'll go first on a business trip, and then once the heat has died down, he'll send for Sharon. Naturally, Sharon does not believe his ass, but she'll play along for now. As Cliff laments the fact that he won't get to see the shoddy machinery he ordered blow up in everyone's faces, he spots Wilma, Betty, and Dictabird sneaking off. While all this is going on, the mob catches Fred downtown.
You can't do this! I was afraid! The minutes are gonna be boxed!
Don't ask me why I find that joke so funny, I just do for some reason. I don't need to explain myself, minus this video explaining all my thoughts on this movie. Don't worry about it. Don't think about that part. Honestly, the comedy in this movie is pretty on point. I don't know if it's bust your gut funny, but it's pretty clever most of the time. The mob is about to string up Fred just as Barney, manning an ice cream truck, rolls around. He and Fred have a little back and forth, and the mob leader asks, do you guys know each other? Barney explains he used to be Fred's best friend.
Taken away, if it wasn't for me, this whole mess probably wouldn't have happened.
Thanks for filling us in, mister. We could have made a very big mistake here. Hang both of them. What?
You fool! You absolute buffoon. Now confronted with their demise, the two finally make amends and forgive each other. Luckily for these two goons, their wives literally crash the party and present Dictabird to the mob to clear Fred's name. Although first, Dictabird wants an apology from Fred for how he treated him back at the office. Justice. Fred reluctantly gives in, and Dictabird agrees to tell his tale.
Gather round, everyone. I'll tell you the tale of an unsophisticated man caught up in a treacherous web of power, deceit, and lust.
They went so hard for a character that mostly just serves as a plot device, and I am so glad they did. So now that they're out of that jam, they head back to Pearl's house only to find somebody has broken in.
What kind of madman would do something like this?
Based, they find that the kids are now missing, with only a note demanding that they bring Dictabird to the quarry the next morning with no police. Fred and Barney do just that, meeting Cliff there with Pebbles and Bam Bam tied up on the new machinery. Cliff demands that they hand over Dictabird, and they do so, reassuring Dictabird they'll come back for him as soon as the kids are safe. But once Cliff has Dictabird, he throws the switch to the machinery, getting the whole thing started before bolting away. The two can't get this thing switched off again, so Barney, thinking fast, uses the catapult to fly himself up to where the kids are. Bam Bam is so impressed with his father's slick moves, he finally says his first words. This excites Barney so much, he gets hit in the head and knocked out. But then Fred gets his own idea. Thinking back to how he broke the model of this contraption, he figures he can do the same thing here. While this is going on, Dictabird manages to escape from Cliff on his own, and Cliff chases after him. The three meet up by the catapult, and Cliff holds Fred up at gunpoint until Sharon hits him over the head with a bag of money. Fred then uses his impressive strength to realign the catapult just as Barney finally wakes up. Barney manages to grab the kids and hop off the conveyor belt just as the machine is smashed to bits by Fred. Woo! Day is saved, yeah. I just had in the script to do a little jig, so there you go. I hope you liked it. Cliff also wakes up and, seeing that his plane has gone to shambles, tries to make a run for it, but Fred uses his legendary bowling technique to trip him up for a little bit until he's actually stopped by getting covered in a strange mud-like substance. Yeah, a little underwhelming if I'm being honest. So the Fuzz show up, Dictabird explains everything he knows to them, Sharon gets arrested, we love a self-sacrifice, and the strange stuff Cliff is trapped in turns out to be concrete. So like, is Cliff dead? The head of the company wants to make Fred the head of the new concrete division, and Fred turns him down. He says that having money turns him into somebody he doesn't like, which I don't think is true. Fred, buddy, you were conspired against. You fought for the working man's rights. Take the job. Get that back, my guy. Regardless, the movie does leave on a very sweet message I like a lot.
I was always the richest man in the world. I just never knew it.
Based. And with that, the movie is over. Okay, before we conclude, I want to talk about one final thing. So, this movie starts and ends with live-action recreations of the original show's opening and ending scenes. And the framework for these scenes is the Flintstones going to and leaving a drive-in theater, with the episode being the film they watch. So the movie follows this same framing device, which is cool, except the opening scene with Cliff and Sharon scheming sits outside of this framing device. So we see the villains plotting outside of the in-universe movie. Then we see the family go to the theater and start the in-universe movie. Then they defeat the villain in the in-universe movie. Then we leave the movie theater outside of the in-universe movie. So, are Cliff and Sharon still out there? Was this just a prophecy of things to come? So there we have it, and I thought it was pretty good. It's solid, it doesn't have any major pitfalls, but at the same time, it doesn't really push the boundaries at all like Speed Racer was. This is a great baseline for an adaptation, a good starting point. This would be a fantastic movie to get drunk with friends while watching, which is the highest honor I can bestow upon a film. It feels like the people who made this movie really cared. For example, the 2021 Space Jam movie is fine, but it doesn't really feel like anyone cared. This is purely a vibe thing, but it doesn't feel like anyone cared about the original Space Jam or the Looney Tunes or Rick and Morty. But here, this movie feels like it has a veneration for the original cartoon, which is nice. You can feel it in the set design and the effects. They want this to feel like the original cartoon. The plot is pretty creative and solid. It's totally something I can see being a plot of the show, but it also has elevated stakes, which is exactly what I think you want for something like this. I don't think there's much that makes this movie stick out though, besides the set design and stuff. If 5 is like your perfectly average, acceptable film, I'd give this like a 7 out of 10. I personally love it, and if you have like a weekly movie night with your friends, I'd say it's definitely worth putting on the list. So there you have it, video number 2 or 3, depending on what I finish first. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and check out the second channel for more stuff from me that might not fit this exact format. I also have an Instagram where I'll probably be posting about whatever media I'm currently consuming and progress updates on videos. All right, that's all I wrote. Class dismissed.